Hi, this is Greg. I'm going to be going over MVC 3 at this point. I'm not really comfortable enough with 4 and 4.5 to really make it live yet, so I haven't messed with it that much, only vaguely, or only briefly. So these tutorials are all going to be the basics of MVC 3. It's kind of a series that I'm starting. This is the first of many. I'm going to be going over basically the overview of the flow from browser to web application to data source or what have you, whatever the store is, back to the MVC web application and then to the browser. What I have laid out here is kind of a workflow of it from getting an HTTP request into your web application and how it propagates through everything. You can do a MVC application with just these three modules right here. Oops, right here. This view model, controller, and view. I don't recommend it. I started out with that, but I'm sure you can gather, when you start doing gets and adds and modifies and everything to your data and your views, the controller can get very messy very quickly, especially if you're accessing the view model, making changes to that, then you're making calls to the data access layer either through the repository or the DAL. It just gets really, really messy quick. So what we've devised is separating things a little further, abstracting them out a little more. And by doing that, we came up with these other classes: servicer, converter, and repository. Um, the best way to kind of look at the servicer is that's kind of like the controller is like the main hub from anything that's going to go into the view to the view is the best way to look at it. Anything that's going to go into the view at any point in time gets to the controller first. Nothing touches the view directly other than the controller. So you can look at it as the controller is the central hub for the view and everything that goes out to the browser. Now, what the controller will do is the controller obviously is going to need data from the data access layer one way or the other. Whether it's directly, indirectly, it doesn't matter. It's got to get it somehow. So what we decided to make was this servicer class. Now, what this servicer class is going to do is it's going to get stuff that the controller needs. It's going to have that DTO, and it's going to use another class called the converter to convert it to something that the controller understands. Now, the reason we did this was so that the controller never knows anything about the DTOs or anything about the data access layer. It's completely separated. There's complete separation of concerns. Now, the way we're doing that is because the servicer calls the repository. Okay, that's great, and the repository calls out, right? Now, the repository could either be hooked into a data store directly using entity or regular SQL syntax. I don't recommend doing it that way because you're not separating your data access layer from the application very well, but it can be done that way. Usually I will make, as it shows here as an example, a web service of some sort, whether it's an ASMUX or a WCF web service or a web API web service. Usually I'll use one of those three as my entrance from the repository into the next layer before it gets to the data access layer, and all my libraries for the data access layer would be behind the web service. But that's for another tutorial. I just want to give you guys a brief overview of these things, so sorry if I'm going off on some tangents on some of this stuff. So, like I said, the servicer will call the repository. Then the repository is going to return data to the servicer. Now the servicer is going to say, okay, great, I've got all this data, and it's a DTO, but I already know that the person that's calling me doesn't understand DTO. So what do I do? Well, like I said, we made this converter class, and this converter class is going to take the DTO or the model. As you'll see, there's different reasons for doing different things, and I'll explain that in a second. But in this case, this call flow, the converter, or it would be converting it from the DTO to the model because we're doing a get, right? So eventually it's going to come back to the model in that instance, and then after it converts it, it passes it back to the servicer. The servicer passes back to the controller. It says, okay, now I have something to deal with. Now I can take my view model, I'll instantiate that, shove it into the model, and pass it to the view. And then the view knows what to do with the model, because the strongly typed of these three, this one, this, and this whole this whole concept of strongly typed as opposed to weakly typed allows you, not only from the IntelliSense standpoint, but just from a compilation and overall ease, allows you to be able to use the same object that you define in here without any issues. So that's cool, and like I was just kind of hinting at, IntelliSense understands the strongly typed, and when you're in the view coding stuff, which, like I said, in another tutorial we'll go into, what was I getting at? You can use the syntax that you find in here. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's say you have this object, this view model called person view model. I know it's an overly used object name, but just bear with me. So you got this person object, right? And you have three properties. You have first name, last name, and age, right? That's pretty common. When the controller gets the view model and the view model person, and it passes that to the view, if you tell the view, hey, I'm going to be passing you object of type person, which you do it through some model syntax at the view layer, okay? The view will take that in, and then IntelliSense can pick up the fact that, okay, you're talking about this model and this model alone. What do I, what can I, what do you want to do with it? And if you do model dot first name, model dot last name, the IntelliSense is going to pick that up. It's going to know what you want, and you can use lambda expressions and a whole bunch of other stuff that I'm not going to get into this episode, because I can already see I'm at 7 minutes, so I don't want to waste too much more time on this. But I just want to give you guys an overview of the whole flow that it goes through, what happens from point A to point B to point C and back to point A. And I think this will give you a pretty good understanding. If you take this and kind of just go over it a few times, maybe even go over it while you're going over some of the other tutorials with me, it will probably make a lot more sense. And I'm going to save this, and I might bring it up in other episodes just to give you an idea of, okay, this is where we are, and we're at this part of the controller, which is pushing it to the servicer. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I hope it made some sense. I promise that in the new tutorials it will make a little more sense as we proceed. Alright, have a good day. Thanks, bye.